You should have this download now, this color page template, and it's pretty straightforward. It's just 5 web pages, and then we just have one CSS thing and a whole bunch of images. So basically, the purpose of this website is we are trying to create 5 different layouts. Right? So I'm going to start off with the yellow one, and the yellow one, you'll see that I have 4 div containers. Um, what I want to do with this one is basically have it so I have one div container, another div container, and another div container all side by side, and then one big large one underneath. Okay. So let's look at that. So I have the first 3 div containers that are all going to be the same size and height, and they're going to make up the top row. And I just call them all yellow 1. Then I have one giant div container that I'm going to put on the bottom called yellow 2. So my main CSS, this stuff right here means it's like commented out. So this yellow doesn't affect any of the code. So that way I can just keep notes. So this way I have all my yellow code all together. So this will only apply to the yellow page, and then it's just a way of kind of organizing it. And as your files get bigger, you just have to go this way. So if I look at my yellow website now, it looks kind of junky, right? So I need to figure out a way to kind of tone it down a little bit. Like I said, the first 3 ones I want to have all go side by side. So yellow 1 should be 3 of them all in a row. So I'm going to hold off on the width for a couple seconds, and I'm going to start with the margin. So if I have 3 of them side by side, and with a 1% margin, right? So if you can imagine 3 boxes, there'll be a little bit of margin on the left and on the right of each box. So a little bit on the left, 1%, a little bit on the right, 1%. That means each of them is going to push away 2%. And I have 3 of them, so that's going to take up 6% of my page. So that means I have 94% remaining, and I have 3 of these things. So 94 divided by the 94% of the page that I have remaining, divided by 6. Divided by 3. Means that each of my div containers can have a width of 31.3%. So 31.3333%. Okay. So that way I use 100% of the page. Other things I want to do, if I want them to kind of move around, I need to put a float, and I'm going to have them all float left. Now, that just sets the gravity and allows them to be moved around. And it says, if at all possible, try to get up and left as possible. Anything else? Let's all give them a set height. Let's try 100 pixels, and we'll see. It'll fail, but it'll be informative of fail. Okay. So you can see that we have all these ones across. Actually, what I want to do is I want to put in a background color of white. How about that? That way we can see kind of what's going on a little bit better. And you can see where the div container is. All the images are spilling out of it. And because they're floating, it allows them to move. And this text now feels like, well, if it's floating and it only goes down to this div container, I can sneak up in there. So if I change this to maybe like 400 pixels, you'll see it pushes that down. I'm going to do something very similar on the second one, except for now I don't want to have a width of 31%. I want to have a width of 98%. I'll have the width of 98% because if I'm going to give 1% on each side, right, that'll use 100% of it. And I'm going to remove the height one for this, just whatever works out for it, and let's see how that works. Cool. So that's a pretty good 3 by 1 way, and with that 1% margin, it kind of ensures that these things kind of line up, which is a nice look. Okay, so let's look at the next website, which is Blue. So for Blue, I'm going to kind of flip this. I'm going to have this big long one up on top and then 2 side by side. So Blue, I have this div container with text, and it's going to go on the top, and hopefully blue 1 will span the entire distance. And then blue 2 are going to go side by side, and they are going to take up the rest of it. Right? So if I go to blue, I'm going to kind of do a similar thing here. So I'm going to steal this from yellow. So blue 1 wanted to go all the way across. Well, I can do that same trick of having a width of 98 and 1%, right? And turning on this float is very important. The blue on the bottom, we wanted both of those to have a, we wanted two of them basically side by side. So if I have a margin of 1%, if I have left and right, if they're two side by side, that's 4%. So that means I have 96% left to deal with. So 96% of the page left to deal with, and I have two div containers I'm splitting it between. So I can give each of them 48%. So if I change this, each of those div containers to have a width of 48%, let's see what blue looks like. There you go. So it's just a little bit of math here and there, and you can increase the margin if that's what you want to. Right. All right. So moving on to, let's do red next. Red is pretty straightforward. I want to just have a 4x4, like a 2x2, right? So 4 div containers, and they're all images. Well, there's really no difference between that and these blue ones, right? But I'm going to do this one just a little bit different. Yeah. So you will not have that right there. There's only one type of div container we want. This one I want a little bit more margin. Let's say I had 5% of the margin for the red page. So on the red one, I want 5% margin, and I want these two on the same line and these two on the same line. Well, I need to use 100% of the page, so I'm going to have 5% on the left of this one, 5% on the right, 5% on the left, 5% on the right, for a total of 20%. And that leaves 80% for the rest of the page, and I'm using 2 div containers. So I can use, oh boy, I can use 40% on for each of those div containers. So I go to main CSS, I'm going to turn my, I'm going to turn this to 40%, and let's see what the red page looks like. Okay. So the red page, it has a whole bunch of different heights with these, so each of the different pictures. So that's one thing you can kind of see that's kind of causing it some issues. So let's make them all have a set height of like 200 pixels. And all those images are getting too big, so we can actually, let's make the div containers even smaller, and that'll naturally resize the images. So if I want to make the div containers like, let's say I want to make them like 30%. Well, if that's 30%, two of them side by side is 60%, which means I have 40% left to give, which means I can use 10% on each side. And yeah, it works all right. All I need to do now is I need to increase the height of the div containers because the images are too big for it. So that's no big deal. I'll just take the height, and instead of that, I'll do 400. It takes a little bit of playing around, but you'll get to the spot where you're comfortable with it. Okay. So that's the red one, 2x2. The margin could be a little bit big on the up and down, right? Because when I click 10% here, that's 10% in all directions. So if I only want 10% on the left and right, I would do like this. And that'll be the first number controls, oh, I did it backwards. The first number controls up and down, and the second number controls that. So if I want to do like maybe only give like 20 pixels of space, that'll bring it closer in. Cool. So purple is next, and purple is a little bit trickier. For purple, for purple, I kind of want something like this. It's kind of like a, I'll sketch it out here. So I'm going to have one div container top left, one top right, one central in the second row, and then like this and like this. So kind of like an X, right? So if I go to the purple part of the page, I have, I probably call it purple 1 and purple 2, I bet. So the purple page, yeah, I'm going to have these two images side by side, and then the text, and then these two images side by side. Okay. So purple 2 is the middle text one. I'm going to start with that one because it'll be a little bit easier. Purple 2, I want in the middle, and I'll have it have a width of 30%. We'll have all these ones have a width of 30%. And if I want it in the middle, my margin on each side needs to be 30, means that I'm only using, that I have 70% of the page to use. So if I put 35% on each side, that will make up the other 70%, and that'll use 100% of the space. For the two purple backgrounds, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have them be like this. They're going to be similar to, yeah, on the blue page, we already did something like this, where we have two side by side. So if I want to have that, I will use the blue code of this. These are the ones that are side by side. So on my main CSS, so once you have the code for like two side by side ones, I mean the math doesn't change. So okay. So the purple, we have two that are side by side. Probably what I want to do is we could tone down the size of these ones, and then I have this one centered, and then two more down below it. If you do want to tone down the size, it's the same exact stage as we did last time. Let's say I want like 20%, a width of 20%. That means that I'm going to have, yeah, so if I do a width of 20%, that means 40% of my page is used because there's two side by sides, 20 times 2. So that means 60% of my page is still available, and I need to have some on the left, on the right, on the left, and the right. So 60 divided by 4 means I can put 15% on the two sides. And I've got that layout that I wanted, right? That kind of X pattern. It looks all right. We got to get some padding on in there because that looks terrible, but for another time. All right. Lastly, green. Green, it's a great one. Green, what I want to do, I'll just sketch it out on the page here. Green, I want one long, big, tall text one, and then I want 3 pictures on the right side. So for green, I have the big long text div, which is green 1, and then I want green 2. So taking a look at the main CSS, green 1 is the one that I want floated to the left. In fact, I'm going to float all of them to the left. Actually, never mind. I'm going to float this one to the right. Sure, you can do it floating everything to the left. I mean, most of the time you can succeed in doing everything just floating to the left. Okay, so I want, if you remember our sketch, right? Green 1, I want big, long, taking up half the page. And over here, I want 3 ones that take up the right side of the page. So green 1, I want to cover like this 50% of the page. But if I hog up 50% of the page, it's going to not leave enough for the other side. So I'm going to do like 45% and leave some room for margin to take hold. So if green 1 only gets 50% of the page and already 45% of it's used for its width, then the margin for the left and right ones, which remember the first digit controls up and down, so this would be 2.5%. So as long as this times 2 plus that is 50%, we should be good. Yup. Now these these three ones, right? I want to have them get a width of, well, same thing, I want that side to be 50%, right? So let's say I give them a width of 40%. Then the margin I can use on that page, on that side, would be, if it's 40%, I have 50% total to give, right? Total. So that means I have 10% left. So I can afford to use 5% on each side. And I'm going to use that same 20 pixels like I did up here, so that the tops of the two div containers will be the same. All right, let's cross our fingers. And it doesn't work. Okay, it doesn't work because this one worked, and then this one said, let's go right. And this one said, I would love to go right, but I can also go up first before I can go right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and I'm going to say, I'm going to give it a height of, let's say 1,000. No, let's just go crazy, 10,000 pixels. And if I use up all that room, then now the green ones all snap in line. Right? So that's the basics of kind of some of this formatting stuff. And we're going to do a couple little things to the site, put in some fonts and things like that next to the paragraphs. But that's a good start.